Welcome to a webinar on benefit planning queries, BPQYs, verifying disability benefit from Social Security. Before we get started, there are actually 11 different files related to this webinar, and I wanted to point that out. You should be able to find all of them where you've found this webinar recording. And it would be very helpful if you either had a split screen or two different screens, or could print out some of the files to be able to use with this training. And as we get to sections where you'd be using multiple files at one time, usually two at a time, I will point that out. So there are 5 objectives to this training: to be able to explain what a BPQY is, explain how to get it. There are a couple different ways to obtain a BPQY, to identify key information that's contained in it, to explain why it's important, and to get some practice reading and interpreting BPQYs, including some clues and some quirks that may be relevant. So first of all, what is a BPQY? Well, it's a report provided by Social Security that verifies some key information about Social Security Title II disability benefits and SSI benefits. It provides information from Social Security's data record, but it's important to note that information will not appear in the BPQY unless it's been reported to Social Security and entered into their data system after being reported. So one thing that a BPQY can do is help you identify whether certain information has been reported to Social Security, especially information about a person's earnings. So BPQYs provide a lot of helpful information. We'll be going through a number of examples to show you that, but they're often out of date, either because a person has not reported key information, like about their earnings to Social Security, or even if they have reported their earnings or other information, Social Security hasn't entered it into their data system yet. So how can you go about getting a BPQY? There are 2 basic ways. One, you can request a BPQY from someone known as a WIL. That's short for Work Incentives Liaison. There's one appointed for each local Social Security office, each field office. And you would be requesting a BPQY from the field office that services the individual's home zip code. So you need to know which field office serves that person, and then identify the WIL, or Work Incentives Liaison, in that office. So there is a list of WILs, Work Incentive Liaisons, for all the field offices in Missouri in this document. So it's divided into 2 areas: Missouri Area 1 and Missouri Area 3. And you should be able to find all of the local offices in the state on this list, and it identifies the name of each WIL, their phone number, and their fax number. Okay. And you want to identify the WIL, and you need to fax them 2 different copies of the same form in order to have them release a BPQY to you. Okay. So why would you possibly need 2 different copies of the same form, SSA 3288 form. There actually is some logic to this. And bear with me a moment, I need to pull these up. So this form is called the Consent for Release of Information. Form number is SSA 3288. And what you'll see is that there's some language already typed into it. It says, I want this information released because, and then typed in is, I am planning to go to work and need the information for benefits and work incentives planning. Please send a benefits planning query. A little further down, there are several boxes checked for which information needs to be released. Current monthly Social Security benefit amount, current monthly supplemental security income or SSI payment amount, and other records from my file. And below other records from my file, it's typed in my cash benefits, health insurance information, medical review dates, representation, SSDI and SSI work activity and earnings, all employment supports data on my SSA record. The language that's typed in and the check marks, X's in the three boxes should always be left alone. You don't want to change that. That's standard for a BPQY request. What you would do with this form is fill in the individual's name under my full name, their date of birth under my date of birth, and my Social Security number. Put their Social Security number. You'll enter the name of the person or organization, that would be you who are requesting it, and the address of you or the organization who's making the request. And at the bottom of the form, the individual signs on the signature line, you enter the date, enter their home address, and their telephone number, their daytime phone number. Okay, so that is one of the two SSA 3288 forms that need to be faxed to the will for the request. Here's the second one. It's exactly the same form, the SSA 3288. What's different is what's typed into it. Here, this one says, I want this information released because I need this information for program purposes. And box number 8 has an X in it, other records from my file, and typed in below that is non-certified yearly totals of earnings. This form, you're going to do the exact same information that you added to the first copy of the form, person's name, date of birth, Social Security number, you or your organization's name and address, and the individual will sign, date, enter their address and their daytime phone number at the bottom. So why do you need the two different versions? The first version we looked at provides consent by the individual for Social Security to release information that belongs to them, their data. The second version, the one we're viewing now, allows the release of information from the IRS. One field in the BPQY is an IRS earnings record. So that's data taken directly from the IRS. And that's why two different release forms are needed. One for Social Security data, the second for IRS data. So once both copies of that form have been released, completed, then you'd fax them to the will in the local office. Okay. So you don't want to change the text that's been entered into the form, as I mentioned. And again, one copy of the form is for Social Security data, the other is for IRS earnings data. Now, suppose you fax the request to the will and they don't send you the BPQY within 2 or 3 weeks. Then you can contact someone known as the Area Work Incentives Coordinator, or AWIC for short. There's one for Western Missouri, that's Laura Fulmer, whose information is here on slide 6, and a different one for Eastern Missouri, that's Jenny Cole, whose contact info is also on slide 6. And then they can intervene or send you the BPQY themselves. But you first need to request it from the will in the local office if you're requesting it yourself from Social Security. There is an alternative, and in many instances, this can work more quickly than if you request the BPQY from Social Security. And the alternative is have the beneficiary, the person who receives benefits, make the request. They can do that by calling Social Security's national toll-free number, 1-800-772-1213, and requesting their BPQY. Now, the downside to calling the national toll-free number is that there's often a long wait. The upside is the recording will tell the individual about how long the wait will be. So if it's an ungodly amount of time they're going to have to wait, they can just hang up and decide to call again another time. If it's something less than half hour, 45 minutes, then they can do other things to occupy them while they're waiting on hold. When they get through to a person, the most likely response they'll get when they request a BPQY is, sure, no problem, we'll mail it to your home address. And they'll usually get it within a week, sometimes within a few days. However, sometimes when they call that toll-free number, they'll get a representative who may not be knowledgeable and who may provide misinformation. First of all, they may not know what a BPQY is. They may claim that they're not able to provide it to the individual, or they may claim that they can provide it to the individual, but they have to charge them a fee for it. And none of those things are true. So if the individual gets an unknowledgeable representative, they have a choice. They can ask to speak with a supervisor. The supervisor should certainly know what a BPQY is and that the person can request it and get it for free. Or if they prefer, they can just hang up. They can do it politely, but get off the phone and then call again. And be virtually certain to get a different representative when they call back again. And most likely the next one will be more knowledgeable. This can be a great alternative, particularly if you experience difficulty getting BPQYs from certain wills. Now, the only trick to this is once the individual has the BPQY, then you need to find a way to get it. Either the person needs to scan it or take a picture of it and email it or text it to you, or they need to snail mail it to you or perhaps fax it. So what information can you find on the BPQY? And we will be looking at half a dozen actual BPQYs, so you'll see this in practice. But just a quick summary of the kinds of data it includes. The benefit type, either Social Security Disability Insurance or SSI, Supplemental Security Income, or some people get both. The payment status, is the person currently getting payments or not? The date of the onset of the disability, the date that their disability met Social Security's criteria for disability. The date of entitlement, that would be the date that they became entitled to the benefit, which can be different from the date of onset. Whether the person has statutory blindness. Does the person meet Social Security's definition of blindness, which incurs certain more beneficial rules than for people with any other disability? The benefit amount for each benefit, the total family benefits. If there is more than one person being paid on a single earnings record, the BPQY will show you the total benefits being paid to everyone being paid on that record, everyone in the family who's getting benefits, in addition to the benefit amount received by the individual you're assisting. If the person has an overpayment on their record, they owe money back to Social Security, information about that will be on the BPQY. Information about the most recent medical review they had, the Medical Continuing Disability Review, or CDR, and how frequently the CDRs are supposed to occur. Whether the person has a representative payee. Information about their Medicare Part A and Part B entitlement, when they became entitled or enrolled in Part A and Part B. Their Medicaid status, this provides just very limited information. Usually it only shows if a person is getting Medicaid if they're eligible based on receiving SSI or 1619B. It may, although this is fairly rare, provide some information about SSI work incentive use. It may provide information about Social Security disability work incentive status, the trial work period, cessation month, the extended period of eligibility. This is much more common. It has the annual IRS earnings record. IRS provides annual earnings information to Social Security after the end of each calendar year, usually by sometime in the spring. SSI recorded monthly earnings. This is if the individual receives SSI and has reported their earnings to Social Security. And SSDI posted monthly earnings. This is if the person gets a Title II disability benefit and has reported their earnings. As a general rule, you should never provide work incentives counseling unless you've got a BPQY, because the information on the BPQY can be really vital in identifying which benefits a person gets, the status of their payments, if they're getting payments, their work incentive history and use, and information about earnings history. If you rely only on information an individual tells you, instead of getting this official verification of benefits from a BPQY, you may get misinformation. Many people don't know which benefit they get, or worse, they do know which benefit they get, but they're wrong. The BPQY verifies that information very officially, in addition to providing earnings history, work incentive information, so that you're much more likely to be advising the person based on accurate information and not based on incorrect data. However, it's important to note that BPQYs often are not up to date. They have incomplete data. They occasionally even have some inaccurate information. This would be inaccurate information beyond just having incomplete information that hasn't been updated recently enough. But oftentimes you can look at a BPQI and note some clues that will tell you if the information is incomplete or inaccurate, and will help you determine the correct information. For example, many BPQYs for people who receive Social Security disability will show no trial work period months have been used. But the same BPQY may show an earnings record that suggests that the person's earnings have most likely or certainly been high enough for them to use some or even all of their trial work period months. And that will tell you that Social Security has either not received earnings reports from the individual, or they haven't entered the information into their data system yet. So BPQYs can provide some helpful hints about a variety of issues. First, for somebody who gets SSDI, they can provide hints about whether there are dependents, dependent children, dependent spouse, who are receiving benefits on the same earnings record as the person who's getting SSDI on their own record. The BPQI can provide hints or actual information, definitive information, explaining why a person's net benefit amount, the amount they're actually receiving, may be less than the full benefit amount they're due. And most common reasons would be that Medicare premiums are being deducted from their Social Security disability, or they have an overpayment and money is being deducted from their cash benefit to recover the overpayment, or perhaps they owe child support and money is being taken out of their benefit to pay child support, or they owe back taxes and their benefit is being garnished for taxes that they owe. The BPQY will provide the status of the trial work period and the extended period of eligibility. Again, it may not always be up to date if earnings haven't been reported to Social Security, or even if they've been reported, Social Security has not yet entered those dates or the data into their system. So with the information and clues you've got about earnings, you can often see if the work incentive usage information on the BPQI may or may not be accurate. You can determine if benefits have been terminated. Sometimes you can estimate whether the benefits have been reinstated through expedited reinstatement or a new application after they were terminated. So when you receive a BPQI, you want to look at each section carefully and see if there appear to be any discrepancies. If so, you want to contact Social Security to get them resolved. There's another document we have here called Tips for Reviewing BPQYs that I'll pull up in a moment. There's also a very helpful BPQY handbook that you can download at the link here on slide 14. So tips for reviewing BPQYs looks like this. We won't go through it now, but you'll be able to see it's almost 7 pages long, provides a lot of helpful information for reviewing BPQYs. But we're going to do this in actual practice. So now let's take a look at a few sample BPQYs. Okay, we're going to look at 3 BPQYs just to get an idea of where you find the information and how to interpret it. So the BPQY will provide the individual's name, if it's an actual BPQY received by or received from Social Security for a real person, provide the last 4 digits of their Social Security number. Now it shows 2 columns, Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, which will include SSDI on the individual's own earnings record, as well as a childhood disability benefit, which the BPQY refers to as a disabled adult child or DAC benefit, or a disabled widow's or widower's benefit. And the next column, supplemental security income or SSI. So, scrolling down a little bit, you'll see a variety of data provided for each type of benefit, Social Security Disability and SSI. For this particular BPQY, the type of cash benefit is disabled adult child. To the right of that, in the SSI column, it says disabled child. But under current status, the next line down for cash benefit, you'll see the disabled adult child benefit is in current pay status. That means this person is getting monthly payments of disabled adult child, also known as childhood disability benefits. But in the SSI column, this current status is terminated. So this person was getting disabled child benefits from SSI, but those benefits have been terminated. They're not getting them anymore. Next down is statutory blindness. And under disabled adult child, it says no. So this person is not blind. The date of disability onset is October 2003. You're not seeing a date of disability onset, etc., for the SSI benefit. That benefit's been terminated, so that won't be relevant. So we're looking now at a benefit for at a BPQY for somebody who's currently receiving the disabled adult child or childhood disability benefit. Used to get SSI, but it was terminated. Now, the date of entitlement was September 2004, 904. This tells us that although the person was disabled enough to get benefits almost a year earlier, they didn't meet all factors of entitlement, didn't start getting the benefit until September 2004. The full amount of the benefit is $1,053.50 a month. That tells you a clue about why the SSI may have been terminated. It's likely that this person started out on SSI, then was switched to the disabled adult child or childhood disability benefit on a parent's record. With $1,053 a month of that Title II benefit, that would cause their SSI to terminate. The net amount is $1,053 a month. They round down to the nearest whole number, nearest whole dollar amount. Others paid on this record, yes. Since it's a benefit received on a parent's record, then at least one other person, the parent, may be receiving benefits on that record. Total family cash benefit, $3,160. That means that the total benefits received by the individual who's getting the disabled adult child benefit and the parent and possibly any Other dependents getting benefits would be $3,160. There's no overpayment balance, that's a 0. No amount being withheld for an overpayment. Next section is medical reviews. The next medical review is scheduled for around April 2023. And the medical re-exam cycle, this person should be getting medical reviews about every 7 years. Representation, there is a representative payee this person has. They don't have an authorized representative. An authorized representative is generally going to be an attorney who's representing a person when they apply for benefits, particularly if they have to appeal. The bottom of page 1, you'll see the date this BPQY was produced was in August of 2016. Next page starts with health insurance. Medicare type is Part A and Part B. For Medicaid, it says referred to state for determination, 1634 states. 1634 states are states in which a person is automatically eligible for Medicaid if they receive SSI. Missouri is not a 1634 state. It's known as a 209B state. That's a state in which a person has to apply separately for Medicaid, and they're not automatically eligible when they receive SSI. Now, this person could be receiving Medicaid another way. It could be receiving Mo Health Net through Take It to Work health assurance, for example. The BPQY would not show that. BPQY will only show or provide clues about Medicaid that might be based on SSI or 1619B. Now, under Medicare for Part A, there's a start date of 9/2006. For Part B, it's 10/2009. So this person started getting Part A, which was mandatory, September 2006, but they didn't enroll in Part B until just over a year later. So they probably declined Part B for about a year. So Part A, the start date of 9/2006, we can look back at the date of entitlement and see that that was 9/2004. So the Medicare entitlement for Part A occurred 2 years and a month after entitlement to the disabled adult child benefit. That's what we would expect because of the 2-year waiting period for Medicare. Next down is buy-in, well, actually stop, but there's no stop date for Medicare. This person's still entitled. Next is buy-in. There's a yes under Part B. This means that there is a program paying the Part B premium for this individual. Could be a Medicare savings program. It could be certain other benefits. Next down is SSI work exclusions, blind work expenses, impairment-related work expenses, student earned income exclusion, and plan to achieve self-support or PASS. This person doesn't have a history of using any of those SSI work incentives. And we've got SSDI work activity. And this is where you find some useful information about work incentive status, starting with trial work months. We've got a start date and an end date. Starting May of 2011, ending October 2012, this person used all 9 months of their trial work period. And the last month was October 2012. Shows month of cessation, not applicable. That means most likely this person has not done SGA after their trial work period ended. The cessation month is the first month of SGA after the trial work period. The current SGA level when this BPQY was produced in 2016 was $1,130 a month. In 2020, it's $1,260 a month. The last work review action, the last time Social Security reviewed this person's earnings and work incentive status, was October 2015. So it was about 10 months before this BPQY was produced. Demonstration project information, this person was not enrolled in the bond project or the pod project or other Social Security demonstration projects. And now we get to the earned earnings section, the final section of the BPQY, which is very important. We've got the IRS recorded earnings yearly section. And again, this is information that the IRS would provide to Social Security after each calendar year. And it shows earnings for the entire year, and it will go back as far back as the IRS has earnings records. For some individuals, this can go back decades. This person appears to have had earnings reported to the IRS from 2007 through 2014. But it's not a monthly breakdown, it's just showing yearly totals. Next is SSI recorded earnings monthly. We have no data in this section for this person, most likely because they didn't report any earnings or they didn't receive any earnings when they did get SSI before it was terminated. And finally, we've got posted SSDI monthly earnings. Oftentimes, this section will be blank even if the person receives a Title II benefit and has had earnings, and that would indicate that their earnings had not been reported, or if they were reported, that Social Security had not yet entered them into their data system. But this person did report earnings, and you can see monthly earnings reported from September of 2011 through October of 2015. And the record is showing the gross wages, whether or not they were verified. A Y in the verified column means yes. This means the earnings were verified by Social Security. They're not just an estimate. No self-employment listed, total countable earnings. If work incentives like impairment-related work expenses or subsidies were applied, the countable earnings could be lower than the gross wages. For this individual, it looks like the countable earnings are the same as the gross wages the entire way. This means this person has not been using Title II work incentives. Okay. Now, going back to the trial work period section, we see the trial work months started May 2011. The ninth and final one was October 2012. Let's take a look at those months, starting with May 2011. Well, we don't have a record of that. That's not on the posted SSDI monthly earnings. First posted monthly SSDI earnings were September 2011. And let's look what the earnings were that month. $693.60. Well, in 2016, when this BPQY was produced, the threshold, the earnings threshold for using a trial work period month was $720. So this person wasn't using trial work period months in September, October, November, December, January. We come to February 2012, when the trial work period threshold was still $720. The earnings are $1,084.80 a month. Over 720, that means this would be a trial work month. March is not, it's below the limit. April, 723, that's just over the limit. April 2012 would be a trial work month as well. And you can see a number of trial work months for June, July, August, September, and the last one listed was October 2012. Now there are additional months after that when earnings were over 720, but October 2012 happens to be the 9th month that earnings were above the threshold, and that would be the 9th and final trial work period month. So after October 2012, we look at the earnings, we can see they're all pretty low, all well below not only the SGA level, but even the trial work threshold. So this tells us this person did not do SGA after their trial work period ended. Trial work period threshold in 2015 was 1,090, for example. This person had nowhere near 1,090 in wages in any month after that trial work period. So that tells us this person has not had a cessation month, and where month of cessation says not applicable, that's correct. Okay. So we're going to move on to another BPQY. This one is for a person who's a concurrent beneficiary, somebody who's getting both Social Security disability and SSI. So there's going to be valuable data in both columns. In this BPQY, the SSDI column and the SSI column. For type of benefit, for SSDI, we've got disabled worker. That means the person's going to be getting SSDI on their own record. And under SSI, it's disabled individual. So they're getting SSI as an adult. They're in current pay for both benefits, not statutorily blind. You'll see there are different dates of disability onset for each benefit, SSI and SSDI. And it looks like they were eligible for SSI going back all the way to 1994, but they didn't become eligible for SSDI until 2002. That's common. A person may have needed a number of years to work before they had enough work credits to get SSDI. They were entitled to SSDI in June of 2002. That's 5 full calendar months after the date of onset. That makes sense. That's the 5-month waiting period for SSDI. They become entitled to SSI the same month as the date of disability onset. There's no waiting period for SSI. See their benefit amount, 491 SSDI, 262 SSI. Add the two together, you get 753. That's what you would expect because the SSI federal benefit rate in the year this BPQY was produced in 2016 was $733 a month, and a concurrent beneficiary who gets SSDI and SSI and no other income would generally have a total benefit, adding the two benefits together, of $20 more than the SSI federal benefit rate, namely $753 a month. And that's what this person gets. Total family cash benefit for the SSDI is $491, the same as the benefit the person's getting. This tells you this person is the only one getting benefit on their record. We've got 3+ year medical review cycle, different dates for next medical review. Person has a representative payee, no authorized representative. They're getting Medicare, started June 2004, which is 2 years after the date of entitlement to SSDI, which is what you would expect. They're getting a Part B buy-in, so there's a program paying their Medicare Part B premium. We see under Medicaid, eligible for Medicaid SSI, and in fact, this person should be receiving Medicaid or no health net by virtue of the SSI. This person has used all 9 of their trial work period months. Their last work review was June 2009. They've got IRS recorded earnings going back to 1974. And they've only got 1 month of SSI recorded earnings. There's no recorded earning. There are no recorded earnings for posted SSDI monthly earnings for the last 5 years. And we can see that their trial work months were used up a good while earlier, in 2005. The IRS earnings record shows us that after 2005, the person had extremely low earnings in 2006 and 2010, and none in 2007, 8, or 9. So they probably did not need another work review after they had one done in 2009. Because they have no reported earnings by the IRS after 2010, which means they probably didn't work at all. And finally, we're going to look at one more BPQY, this one for a person receiving only SSI. In this one, we see the person's in current pay status. They've been eligible since October 2013. Their benefit amount is $695. In the year this BPQY was produced, again, 2016, the SSI federal benefit rate was $733 a month. So that gives us a clue. There's got to be a reason that this person is receiving less than $733 a month. Well, we know it's not an overpayment because the BPQY says overpayment balance is none. There's nothing being withheld to recover an overpayment. They might have earnings that could be reducing the SSI. They might have deemed income if they're married and their spouse has money. It's conceivable that they're having child support or back taxes taken out of their SSI. There are a variety of reasons, but we do know that they're getting less than the maximum SSI. 7+ year medical re-exam cycle, has a representative payee, should be eligible for Medicaid since they're getting SSI. Under the SSI work exclusion section, we can see that this person was using the student earned income exclusion for some months in 2015 and 2016. So they do have an earnings history. And it's fairly recent since this report was pulled in 2016. go down to the earnings section. We see SSI recorded earnings for months from November 2015 through August of 2016. However, we see that only earnings through February 2016 have been verified. The V in parentheses beside the earnings means verified. After that, the earnings listed are marked E for estimated. So this person's pay stubs were probably submitted through February 2016. That's why the earnings were verified. After that, Social Security estimated what they were for the next several months. Now we can see that the amounts of SSI recorded earnings match the amounts of the student earned income exclusion. So that tells us that all of this person's earnings were excluded through the student earned income exclusion, and that means they should have kept the full amount of SSI. But they were only receiving $695 a month. So they may have had some other unearned income. We can see that their earnings shouldn't be reducing their SSI because the student earned income exclusion excluded all of their earnings from being counted. It could be unearned income, could be some deemed income, or some other reason. That's something you'd want to research. Why isn't the person getting the full SSI benefit amount? Okay, why are there no IRS recorded earnings? Probably because the IRS hasn't reported them yet. You'll see that these earnings started in late 2015. The report was pulled in August of 2016. At that point, maybe the 2015 earnings had not yet been reported by the IRS to Social Security, so they didn't show up on the earnings record. This person probably had no earnings at all before November of 2015. Okay, so those are some examples of BPQYs. And now a few clues and quirks regarding how to interpret BPQYs. First, for a person who gets Social Security disability, under SSDI work activity, you'll find the field we saw called date of last work review action. Now, that may be the date that Social Security completed the last work review, but it could alternatively be the date that Social Security last initiated a work review, but they haven't finished it yet. It's a little unfortunate that they don't just have two different fields, one saying date last work review initiated and date last work review completed, but unfortunately they don't. So you may need to do a little bit of investigation to be able to determine whether that work review was completed or just initiated. Luckily, there are some clues you'll be able to use that we'll be talking about in a little bit. Now, if earnings appear on the BPQY anywhere that are after the date of last work review action for somebody getting Social Security disability, then that means those earnings may not have been reviewed yet. And therefore, the work incentive information may be outdated. Maybe the person has used some trial work months when the BPQY says they haven't, or they've used more than the BPQY says they've used, or perhaps they've used up all of their trial work period months. Maybe they've even had a cessation month. Maybe they're in their extended period of eligibility now. Now, we talked about a concurrent beneficiary, and that was the second BPQY we looked at, somebody who was receiving Social Security disability and SSI. A dual beneficiary is something different. That's a person who receives two different Title II disability benefits. It could be SSDI and CDB, or SSDI and DWB. If a person gets two Title II benefits at the same time, then you need to request two different BPQYs. And you'd be submitting the person's own Social Security number to get the SSDI BPQY, and you'd be submitting the Social Security number for their parent or their deceased spouse to get the BPQY for their CDB or DWB benefit. So you have to submit two different BPQY requests for a dual beneficiary. Now, dual beneficiary could actually have, will have two trial work periods, one for each benefit. And depending on when they became entitled to each benefit and when they worked, their trial work period usage may be different. Suppose they got one benefit sooner and used up some trial work period months, and then they got the other benefit later. Then the first benefit, they would have used some trial work months. They wouldn't have any trial work months used when they first became eligible for the second benefit. They might then use trial work months on that second benefit later, but the two trial work periods would not be aligned. The older benefit might have had more trial work period months used than the newer benefit. Now, when somebody getting Social Security disability reaches age 65, their Medicare is going to switch from Medicare based on receiving Social Security disability to Medicare based on age. Their Medicare will continue, but the BPQY is going to indicate that Medicare entitlement stops. And there will be a date for Medicare stopping. That will be the month the person reaches age 65. And this is because the BPQY only shows you information about disability-based benefits and not benefits that are not based on disability, like Medicare based on age. So if you see a stop date for Medicare, it could mean the person's Medicare actually did stop, but it could also alternatively mean that that is the month they turned 65 and their Medicare switched from being based on disability to being based on age. Now, a person may be receiving Medicaid, also known as MoHealthNet, a variety of different ways that will not show up on the BPQY. Usually you're going to have an indication that a person's getting Medicaid on the BPQY only if they're getting SSI or they're in 1619B status. To verify Medicaid they get in other ways, such as a spend down or ticket to work health assurance, you're going to need to verify that through the state rather than through Social Security. Now, BPQYs often have outdated information, especially if a person has not reported their earnings or Social Security hasn't entered the earnings data into the system yet. And sometimes they'll even have errors. So you want to look at the BPQY and see if there's anything that looks askew that you might need to look into further. The last BPQY we looked at had an SSI payment of $695 rather than $733. It's likely that that's the amount the person's actually receiving and that there's a reason the SSI is reduced and you'd want to investigate that. But if you can't find any reason for that reduction in SSI, you'd want to contact Social Security and see if they have a reason. So if you find any inconsistencies in the BPQY, you always want to contact Social Security to get them resolved. So as I mentioned, the BPQY only provides information about benefits based on disability and not other Social Security benefits such as retirement benefits, dependent benefits, survivors benefits. However, sometimes if a person receives a different kind of benefit that's not based on disability, the BPQY will incorrectly list that benefit as if it were a disability benefit. So you need to watch out for that if a person might be receiving a benefit that's based on retirement, being a dependent, or a survivor, because it may be listed incorrectly on the BPQY. Now, benefits that person receives from agencies other than Social Security, such as HUD or SNAP, have to be verified by the other agencies. The BPQY won't help at all. And now we're going to move on to another PowerPoint. So now that you understand the basics of what information is contained in BPQYs and how to interpret it, now we're going to look at evaluating work activity that's listed on the BPQY. There's a bit of an art to this. So as you could see from the BPQYs we've already looked at, there are three possible places that earnings from work may appear on the BPQY. There's the IRS recorded earnings section, which just shows yearly earnings that IRS reported to Social Security. There's SSI recorded earnings monthly. That'll show up if the individual receives or received SSI and reported earnings, and Social Security entered them into their system. And third is posted SSDI monthly earnings for the last 5 years. This will show up, this will have data in it if the person receives a Title II disability benefit and they have reported earnings and Social Security has entered them into the system sometime within the last 5 years. So again, the IRS earnings record only shows annual amounts, not monthly breakdowns. So what happens if a person has not reported earnings? So you know that they've had earnings or you suspect they have, but you want to figure out if they have not reported earnings or if they have. Well, if they haven't reported their earnings, then generally no earnings will appear in the SSI recorded earnings monthly section or the posted SSDI monthly earnings for the last 5 years. Because those sections only show data if the person has reported earnings and Social Security's entered them into their system. And the earnings may appear in the IRS recorded earnings section, but usually they're not going to appear until at least spring of the following year. And in one of the BPQYs we looked at, you could see that even though the BPQY was pulled in August, of 2016, the IRS earnings record was not even showing up for 2015 yet. So what happens if a person hasn't reported their earnings? Well, that can cause Social Security to incorrectly calculate the person's work incentive status. Maybe they've earned enough to use up trial work months. Social Security doesn't know that, so the BPQY still shows 0 trial work months, or maybe some trial work months, but not as many as they actually used. The person may have used up their trial work period. They may have had a cessation month, but that won't appear on the BPQY if no earnings have been reported. It's possible that the person, particularly if they were doing SGA after their trial work period, that their SSDI, CDB, or DWB payment, their Title II payment, should have stopped. But if they didn't report earnings, Social Security doesn't know that, and they would have continued to get benefits and they would have an overpayment. On the SSI side, if a person had earnings they didn't report, they kept getting higher SSI payments than they should have, they'd have an overpayment by virtue of receiving too much SSI. And again, earnings are only going to show up on the BPQY if they have both been reported and entered into the system by Social Security. So sometimes, even if a person's reported their earnings, if Social Security hasn't gotten around to entering them into their system yet, then the earnings record on the BPQY may be inaccurate. If a person receives a Title II benefit and they report their earnings, that doesn't do any good unless Social Security does a work review, a work continuing disability review, also known as a work CDR, because that's the exercise Social Security needs to undergo to enter the earnings in their system. So how can you figure out if Social Security has reviewed all the earnings on the BPQY or not? Well, what you want to do is look at the earnings and work incentives information on the BPQY and see if it looks like it's accurate based on the earnings that are also showing up on the BPQY. If you see any apparent discrepancies, you want to ask the individual if they've had any earnings that aren't listed on the BPQY. So it's always a good idea to review earnings on the BPQY with the individual just to make sure everything's there. So if a person gets a Title II benefit, you can look at the date of the last work review action, which we saw on page 2, and then look at all the dates of earnings that have been reported in any of the 3 sections where earnings appear on the BPQY. And if there are any earnings that appear after the date of the last work review action, then it's very likely that Social Security has not reviewed, or possibly the person hasn't reported earnings after that work review, and those earnings may need to be reviewed. There may need to be another work review by Social Security to review those subsequent earnings. So how can you determine if Social Security has reviewed all the earnings for somebody getting Social Security disability? Well, you can compare the date of the last work review action with the last date that earnings appear in the posted SSDI monthly earnings chart. Now, if both dates are the same, then that means that Social Security has probably reviewed all of the earnings and that the date of the last work review action is the date that the last work review was completed, not just initiated. But if the dates are different, if you see any dates appearing in the posted SSDI monthly earnings section that are later than the last work review action date, then that means there's some earnings that Social Security has not yet reviewed, and they may need to do another work review to evaluate those earnings. So you have a couple of tools available to you to help you determine step by step if work needs to be reviewed by Social Security that has not yet been reviewed. One tool is called How to Determine If Work Needs to Be Reviewed, Title II. The other is called How to Determine If Work Needs to Be Reviewed, SSI. And just to show you these two tools, here's the How to Determine If a Person Has Done Work That Needs to Be Reviewed for Title II tool. And this one looks pretty similar, but there are some key differences and it's shorter. How to determine if a person has done work that needs to be reviewed for SSI. Okay. And finally, there's one more issue we want to look at, which is whether a person may have done SGA, substantial gainful activity, within 12 months of the date of their disability onset. Okay, why does this matter? Because of Social Security's definition of disability for adults. That definition includes two key parts that we're interested in. One is the inability to do SGA because of a disability. And secondly, that disability has to either have lasted or be expected to last at least 12 months, unless it's a terminal illness. So, looking at those two pieces to the disability definition, what you can figure out is, well, suppose a person did SGA within 12 months of the date of disability onset, the date that their disability met Social Security's criteria. Well, if they did SGA within 12 months of that date, then it's safe to assume that they perhaps did not meet the second part of the definition. Their disability did not meet Social Security's criteria for at least 12 months because they were not incapable of doing SGA for at least 12 months after their disability onset. What happens when that's the case? That could cause the person to be ineligible for a benefit that they've already been approved for. If Social Security later finds out that they did SGA within 12 months of that onset date, Social Security could go back, they could reopen the decision they made to award benefits to the person. They could decide that they weren't eligible for benefits in the first place. They could cancel them all out, and then the person would have to pay back all the benefits they'd received. Or they could decide that the person wasn't disabled when they originally thought they were, their original onset date, but that they weren't, their onset date was later. And that means they'd have an overpayment for the benefits they received before the corrected onset date that was later. However, if a person did SGA within 12 months after their onset date, but they didn't start doing SGA until the date of final determination, the date on the letter that they got that showed that they were being approved for benefits, either Social Security disability or SSI. If they didn't do SGA until after they got the notice saying that they were going to get benefits, this would not be a problem, even if it was within 12 months after the onset date. So SGA within 12 months of onset is only a problem if the SGA was done before the date of the final determination, the date on the letter that says you're approved for SSI or a Title II disability benefit. Now there's another tool that you can use to determine if a person may have done SGA within 12 months after their disability onset date. And that one looks like this. And finally, what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 BPQYs that we'll review. I'll do the first one with you. You can do the second and third ones on your own. And you're going to review each BPQY using the tools that were just shown to you. And you're going to determine if it's likely that the individual reported their earnings, if it's likely that a work review has been completed or is underway. In other words, you're going to look at that date in the last work review action and see if that suggests that the work review was completed on that date or just started. Third, if it looks like Social Security may not have reviewed some earnings that are on the BPQY. And fourth, if the person may have done SGA within 12 months after their disability onset. Okay. So we're going to do the last part of this exercise by looking at some BPQYs. And going through the exercises. So a few key points about each BPQY before we start evaluating the work activity and whether it's been reviewed and whether the person may have done SGA within 12 months of onset. This first BPQY, you can see it's for someone getting SSDI, and it says disabled worker, so they're getting a benefit, an SSDI benefit on their own work record. Their disability onset date was May 2000. Date of entitlement was October 2000 after the 5-month waiting period. Full amount of benefit, $799 and change. Net amount is $662.60. Why would there be the lower amount? Because of the Medicare Part B premium being withheld. Total family cash benefit, same amount as the full amount. This tells you this person doesn't have any dependents getting benefits. Medicare Part A started October 2002. 2 years after the date of entitlement, which was October 2000. That's what you would expect. Part B didn't start until almost a year later. This person delayed enrollment in Part B. That could cause a penalty, a higher Medicare Part B premium. In fact, the difference between the full amount and the net amount of the benefit this person gets for that year does reflect a 10% penalty. There's a penalty of 10% for each year that you enrolled late for Medicare Part B in some cases, unless you are enrolled in a Medicare savings program or another program that would pay the Part B premium for you. So this person actually is paying a higher Part B premium because they waited an extra year to enroll in Part B. You can see that trial work months started May 2015, haven't ended yet. They've used 8 months, according to the BPQY. Their last work review action was January 2016. And this BPQY was produced, the date at the bottom shows us April 27th, 2016. And we see IRS recorded earnings going back to 1973 all the way up to 2015. We see posted SSDI monthly earnings for 2014 through December 2015. And that's the information we need to know. And now, the tools that I will be using and that you can pull up on a separate screen or on a split screen or a printout are how to determine if a person has done work that needs to be reviewed, Title II, and SGA within 12 months of disability onset. So starting with how to determine if a person's done work that needs to be reviewed, Title II. Step 1 says pull key dates from the BPQY. Page 1 of the BPQY, verify that the person gets SSDI, CDB, or DWB. Well, we see this person gets disabled worker under the SSDI column, which is SSDI. And it asks us, number 2, to find the date of entitlement for that benefit. Date of entitlement is October 2000. Now, page 2. And the instructions tell us to look at trial work months. And we see that this person has an initial trial work month of May 2015, but the trial work period hasn't ended yet. They've used 8 months. Now we look at the month of cessation. Month of cessation is not applicable, and that's correct because the cessation would never occur until after the trial work period had ended. Page 3 of the BPQY, posted SSDI monthly earnings for the last 5 years. It says if you see a table with dates, monthly earnings, and a Y in the verified column, it means the work listed here has been reviewed. We want to record the month and year listed on the last row that includes a Y, and that will be December 2015, which has a Y. Okay. Next, step 2. Instructions say, of those dates, which is the most recent? The date of entitlement, which was October 2000, the date of the trial work period start or end date, which was May 2015, the month of cessation, which was not relevant for this person, or the last month and year on the posted SSDI monthly earnings that includes a Y, and that was December 2015. So the most recent date was the last posted SSDI monthly earnings month of December 2015. Step 3 is to check to see if there are any annual earnings listed under the IRS recorded earnings section since the most recent of those dates, since December of 2015. Well, for the IRS recorded earnings section, we see most recently 2015 has earnings reported. So nothing after December 2015. Step 4 says ask the beneficiary if they've had any earnings since the most recent of the dates in step 2. So you ask the person, have you had any earnings after December 2015? Let's say they say no. So if there are any earnings since the most recent of the dates in step 2, namely December 2015, then the person has done work that Social Security has not reviewed. But in this case, Social Security has reviewed all the work because there are no dates of earnings after December 2015. All right. And for the same BPQY, we're now going to check using the other tool, the SGA within 12 months of disability onset tool, step by step to see if this person may have done SGA within 12 months of onset. So the SGA within 12 months of disability onset tool asks, does the person have statutory blindness? Well, we look on page 1 of the BPQY, statutory blindness says no. If the person had statutory blindness and received only SSI, then it wouldn't be an issue for them to be doing SGA within 12 months of disability onset. It's an exception just for blind people getting SSI. We wouldn't have to worry about SGA within 12 months of onset. But since this person is not blind and doesn't even receive SSI, we move on to step 2, which says find the date of disability onset for each benefit the person receives. Well, only one benefit, that's SSDI. Date of disability onset is May 2000. Step 3, if the person is a concurrent beneficiary, cross out the onset date for SSI recorded in step 2. You'll only use the onset date for SSDI, CDB, or DWB. Well, in this case, the person does not receive SSI, so we can skip step 3. Step 4, look at the SSI recorded earnings and posted SSDI monthly earnings. Are any earnings listed after the date of disability onset for any benefit you recorded in step 2. Now, let's see. Do you have any earnings after May of 2000? We certainly do. We've got IRS recorded earnings after 2000. We've got posted SSDI monthly earnings after 2000 as well. So if yes, do earnings in any of the first 12 months after onset equal or exceed the SGA level? Well, let's take a look. Our disability onset date was May 2000. We look at the IRS recorded earnings for 2000, very minimal, only $328. For 2001, zero. And the posted SSDI monthly earnings don't start until 2014. So that tells us that very, very minimal earnings received in 2000 would certainly not have been SGA, and there were no earnings in 2001. And this tells us that, at least from the information we've got here on the BPQY, this person did not do SGA within 12 months of disability onset. Now, step 7 on the tools asks or directs us to ask the person if they had earnings within 12 months after the date of disability onset that don't appear on the BPQY. This person tells us no, and then that confirms that they do not appear to have done SGA within 12 months of onset, and there's no issue. So we've determined that for this BPQY, for this person, there don't appear to be any unreported earnings or any earnings that were not reviewed by Social Security, and no SGA level earnings within 12 months after onset. So we're going to move on to the second BPQY. And you should have the BPQYs for these exercises in the document called BPQY Exercises Part 2. And you're looking now at the second BPQY, which has a disabled worker, person getting SSDI, of $968.80 a month full amount. So you want to have that BPQY available to you, as well as the 2 tools we just used. How to determine if a person has done work that needs to be reviewed, Title II, and the SGA within 12 months of disability onset tool. And now what you want to do is determine from those 2 tools if the person likely had earnings that have not been reported, earnings that have not been reviewed by Social Security, and whether they may have done SGA within 12 months of onset. So you can use those documents, go through both of these BPQYs to answer those questions independently. Pause the webinar, you'll need some time for this, and then return when you're finished. All right, so for the second BPQY, one shown on the screen now with a full amount of SSDI of $968.80. If you used your tools correctly, you should have concluded that there were earnings that had not been reported because there were no posted SSDI monthly earnings appearing, but there were IRS recorded earnings for 2013 and 2014. Also, earnings in 2013 and 2014 appeared high enough to use trial work period months. The trial work period thresholds in 2013 and 2014 were 750 a month and 770 a month, respectively, with earnings of over 12,000 in 2013 and over 16,000 in 2014. Seems that this person would have had earnings high enough to use trial work period months. You'll also note that there was a work review action with a date of August 28th, 2015 listed. Now, since there are no trial work months appearing, even though we can tell from the IRS recorded earnings that this person was earning enough in 2013 and 2014 to use trial work period months, that tells us that the last work review action date is probably the date that the work review action started, but it hasn't been completed yet. If it had been completed, we would see trial work period months having been used, most likely all 9 of them. Now, for this person, the onset date was May 2013. So was SGA possible within 12 months after that? Well, the 2013 earnings were over $12,000. So if that person worked every month in 2013, their average earnings would have been just over 1,000, about 1,010 a month. For 2014, the total earnings were over $16,000 for the year. And if they worked every month, their average earnings would have been $1,393 a month. SGA amounts for 2013 and 2014 were $1,040 a month for 2013 and $1,070 a month in 2014. This means that in 2014, it's very likely that this person did SGA since their average earnings were $1,393 a month. Now, it's possible they may not have been doing SGA. They may have been using IRWs or subsidies, for example, but it's an issue to look at. They may possibly have done SGA within 12 months. You'd want to investigate that further. Okay, and finally, BPQY number 3. For this BPQY, we could see that earnings were reported for SSI, but not for SSDI. See, SSI recorded earnings monthly are shown, but posted SSDI monthly earnings, no data entered at all. Countable earnings and gross wages don't appear at all in there. Now, why is that an issue? Well, if we look at the page 1 of this BPQY, we can see this person is a disabled worker getting a benefit, that's SSDI. In the SSI column, it says disabled individual, non-pay, excess income. Frequently, that's an indication that the person may be in 1619B status, that their earnings are high enough to stop their SSI, but they're still SSI eligible through the 1619B rule, which does two things: protects their Medicaid, their Health Net, and lets them go right back on SSI payments if anything happens to their earnings later. So in other words, this person is likely eligible for SSI, but is not receiving SSI payments. So they're in 1619B status. In other words, this person is a concurrent beneficiary. They're getting SSDI and they're eligible for SSI, albeit without SSI payments. Now, since they're getting SSDI and we know they've worked from the SSI recorded earnings, this suggests that they haven't been reporting their earnings to the Title II claims specialist. This has been a frequent problem over the years. People who are concurrent beneficiaries who get both Title II and SSI will report their earnings to one worker and not the other. And so they assume that reporting their earnings once to Social Security should do it. But in fact, they need to report earnings to two different people, one for the SSI and the other for the SSDI. Now, let's take a look at the trial work months. The BPQY shows that 0 were used. But let's look at the earnings this person had. In 2012, the trial work period threshold was $720 a month. When you look at the SSI recorded earnings for 2012, you can see there are plenty of months when earnings exceeded that. And the threshold for 2011 was even lower. So clearly it looks like this person used trial work period months, but none are listed here. We've got a work review action dated January 28th, 2013, but no trial work months used. This suggests that the work review was not completed at the time that this BPQY was run. Well, what was the date the BPQY was produced? January 30th, 2013, only 2 days after the last work review action date. This tells us that this work review has probably just been started, hasn't been completed yet, so we don't have trial work months updated at all. And finally, let's look at whether this person may have done SGA within 12 months of onset. Our date of disability onset is April 2011 for the SSDI. So let's look at earnings in 2011 and 2012. 2011 and 2012 from, let's see, we're looking at earnings from April 2011 through March of 2012. It'll be 1 year, 12 months within onset. Are any of them SGA? Well, SGA in 2012 was $1,000. And although we've got a few months before March of 2012, when earnings appeared to be above the SGA level, if we average earnings, which Social Security is supposed to do when they fluctuate, at least before the cessation month, they're averaging, the average is going to be below $1,000, which suggests that this person probably did not do SGA within 12 months of onset, even though they did work within 12 months of onset. Great. So congratulations. That was a strenuous, a strenuous webinar, and you have now completed it. Thank you very much for participating.